From the 1011 Now streaming studio in Lincoln, Nebraska, this is the REPORT Husker Show, sponsored by Fat Dog's Convenience Store.
Hi, everyone. Bill Rentschler alongside Chase Matteson in the 1011 Now streaming studio for another edition of the REPORT Husker Show. Chase, week 1 is in the books. Week 2 is Colorado week. I have heard, as I've been out and about around town, people in the gas stations, people in the grocery stores, they're talking about this team. I think a lot of people liked what they saw on Saturday against UTEP.
Yeah, this is really where we turn it up. You can see I'm not wearing any black or gold. I'm wearing blue. But according to Matt Rule, that doesn't matter. This is just another week for the team, but you can feel it for the fan base after the way week 1 went, which I think a lot of people knew on the back end, or at least in the media, that this team was going to be pretty good and pretty talented. And it was a breath of fresh air to see an overhauled offense with new weapons, new quarterback, and for them to score some points in some big ways, unlike they did last season. Obviously, they had those fluke passing attack, but to have a 200-yard passer, they didn't have a 200-yard passer all of last season. Keep in mind. So I think the fan base needed to see it happen for a week, and now I think confidence is at an all-time high going into Colorado.
Like most off seasons, I think a lot of people would say Nebraska was the off-season national champion. And again, for the last I don't know how many years now, we've heard a ton of good things in the off season, but then when the rubber meets the road, there's been some disappointment, there's been some letdown, and so again, I think a lot of fans, myself included, a little hesitant, wanted to actually see the product on the field. And again, it's UTEP, which they should, it's a team that Nebraska should beat and beat pretty handily. But we've seen in the past them not do that and struggle against teams like that. But they did what they're supposed to do. And I think one of my favorite parts was that the fourth quarter was extremely boring and that you had third, fourth, fifth string guys getting some reps.
Well, and to the casual fan or to the person watching at home on Fox, yeah, the fourth quarter was rather stagnant, and you were seeing names you didn't really see out there. But for the coaching staff, for the players, and then also just for the parents that were in the stands, the fourth quarter was Rule's favorite part about the game because they played over 100 guys, which is just remarkable because there's rosters in college football that are close to that number, and it's the Nebraska, once they got into full fall camp, kind of after Big Ten Media Days, it got kind of confirmed that they have a very big roster, over 140 guys. So this first week to be able to see that many get on the field was really just like motivating for, I think, the entire team. And for the fans, would they maybe have liked it to be a 54-7 game? You get 2 more nice touchdown plays? Sure, but you're not going to risk putting your starting quarterback out there. Heinrich Harburg, while he played well, it was, with kind of that second unit, and UTEP was, UTEP didn't play as many guys. They were kind of keeping some of their starters or their twos out there for most of the second half just to get them reps and get them kind of, underneath football. But overall, I think, it was refreshing to see, and I think it was great for this team to have so many players play to really give that depth going into this week.
Won't spend a ton of time on UTEP, but over 500 yards total offense. You had over 200 yards rushing, passing. You almost had 290 yards. Dylan Raiola, again, 19 for 27, 238 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Again, you had the 4 running backs play. I think Dante Dowdell had the fumble inside the 5. I thought he kind of looked the best out of the 4, but and then the humongous wide receivers, Naor and Banks. We haven't had big wide receivers like that around here for a couple years now.
Yeah, the instant impact from the transfer additions, and that's something that this team last year didn't have. Now, granted, you did have Jalen Lloyd make some big plays. Malachi Coleman had that belly option, deep ball versus Northwestern. So you had some exciting and electric plays similar to what Nebraska had last year, but it wasn't just one catch, right? I think Jalen Lloyd had 6 total catches last year, and 3 of them went for 75-yard touchdowns. The difference with Nair is he had a complete game, 6 catches, 121 yards, a touchdown, and Banks just bringing that veteran leadership, and it really it really showed that, like, you get these transfers, you never know exactly how they're going to pan out, but they're the top two guys, and it's clear cut. And same thing with the running back room. I thought you touched on Dowdell. He had the fumble, and Rule said that he put him back in, but he had to hold him out a little bit for him to feel it, which I think was kind of good. And I agree with you. I think Emmett Johnson is probably the most consistent back at any position, but I think the guy that could potentially get you a 4-yard run that goes 80 could be Dante Dowdell. He just has an explosiveness when he runs and just looks like a little bit of a different gear than maybe an Emmett or a Ramir Johnson has. And then Gabe Irvin Jr. is seeming like to be the power back and kind of reserved in that role. And he did well in his goal line carries. I mean, he scored
2
twice.
touchdowns, yeah.
So he took advantage of his opportunities, but they didn't look to put Gabe Irvin Jr. in really any throwing situations or pass pro, and they didn't really try to get him too much out in space. It was more through the trenches, kind of I formation.
I think one of my favorite things that happened during the game was your tweet that you sent out of the footage from the College Football 25 video game, tossing it up to Nayor there. Said, I just saw this the other day, and now I saw it live happen.
Yeah, I had, recorded a few Xbox clips, just, playing the game, and it's crazy how realistic the video games have came, and it's a fantastic game, but it was a little bit like a video game-esque play, and it was a fantastic play by Nair. You have to shout out the wideout, Isaiah Nair. And he seems to be kind of Raiola's go-to guy in terms of just a target share and who he's looking for in some of his progressions. But the throw was really it was a throw that none of the quarterbacks on the roster could have made last year.
And he
dropped it right in the bucket.
And he got hit when he was throwing
under pressure. And so that throw and then the big throw to Jamal Banks were really difference makers of the game. But it starts with the quarterback, right? You have these talented receivers, but it starts with the quarterback. And Marcus Satterfield said today in the press conference that he was a little bit worried that there would be some more emotions and stuff. And Raiola even said that he took it in and he had to be a human and whatnot. When the ball was snapped, he was surgical, as Marcus Satterfield described it as.
Yeah, and you segued perfectly into what I wanted to talk about next, and that was Dylan Raiola. Again, obviously there's a ton of hype, him coming into the program, and you heard only good things really about him through spring, through summer, and now into fall camp. Officially announced as the starter 2 weeks ago. Just a simple Twitter post, social media post. I mean, did he meet your expectations, I guess? I mean, I don't know how much of a better start he probably could have had. A couple incompletions here and there, but some of those were just throwing the ball away and only took 1 sack. And, he's said that one was on me, not on the offensive line, missed his read. Yeah,
well, the 1 sack, I think, was a little bit of also a miscommunication with the receiver in Raiola, that just Raiola looked for something, and the receiver was doing something completely different, and then, he took a sack. But, yeah, really the bar was not very high, I would say, from obviously he's had a mountain of expectations. But I think a clean game, no turnovers, and then a passing game that is dynamic and can score the ball, which they did twice, and who knows if they had kept him in there longer that he potentially could have thrown another touchdown. And also they had 2 basically goal line rushes with him in as quarterback that could have been a mesh option play that he's a drag route to Nair or a Carter Nelson or Thomas Fedoni in the flat, so he could have been more. But yeah, he definitely exceeded expectations, and first offensive freshman of the week since Wandale Robinson for the Huskers back in 2019. And yeah, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but truly a breath of fresh air. And it almost feels, me and Kevin Suit, the sports director, we're kind of talking about this. He's going to face adversity. This season's not going to be perfect, but just so far, it just feels like the road has been very smooth, and it's almost been it almost feels too good to be true.
Waiting for something to go sideways.
And I don't want to speak that into existence, obviously. And he's going to show adversity. He had 1 or 2 balls. He had 1 throw against UTEP that probably could have been picked against a better team, but he kind of threw it into traffic. But overall, he made really smart decisions, and it was just a really, really clean performance overall. There was one play, too, that I liked, that he stuck around the pocket for a while, and then he sailed it like 10 yards out of bounds deep on the right sideline in the first half. And a throw like that is a great throw because it's a throw that potentially last year one of Nebraska's quarterbacks would force, right? He got rid of it, and he also had another fantastic throw in the first half. It wasn't caught. It goes down the stat sheet, an incompletion, but right through Isaiah Nayer's hands. It would have been a tough catch, diving in the end zone. But just overall, it was a really impressive debut for how clean and how mature it was.
Yeah, Satterfield's got to be pretty tickled with all the weapons that he now
He's making
has to play
Satterfield
with.
look good.
Yeah.
And you do have to give a lot of credit to Glenn Thomas, who they brought in, and they're paying a lot of money, because I think having that direct QB coach, especially too, Raiola said today, it's interesting with the iPads on the sidelines. Like, you don't want to have too much nitpicking with things, but he was saying that, like, it's almost like when they looked at film on Sunday, he had already watched some film, because him and Glenn Thomas right to the iPads after each drive. And so I think in some of those situations where he does throw a pick or mess up, that's going to really be a difference maker that they maybe didn't have last year from a coaching standpoint to be able to tweak and improve things as a freshman.
Yeah, and there's a ton of different storylines we could continue to go down. Carter Nelson, seeing him play for the first time, he looked electric. Again, Malachi Coleman didn't play. Sounds like Matt Rule might want to try and redshirt him this year. A ton of different storylines that we'll continue to be able to get into. But getting into Colorado week, again, Colorado played North Dakota State last week. North Dakota State, obviously a very tough FCS team. They're always up there for the national championship. Probably could make an argument if that game's played at a different place that maybe North Dakota State pulls that one out. There was maybe some questionable refereeing towards the end of that game, but Colorado wins 31-26 their opening week game against North Dakota State. But now they'll come to Lincoln as an underdog. Huskers are favored by 7.5 points.
Yeah, and while I do think, there was some calls that probably could have gone either way, there was definitely, I would say, Colorado is a good team, but I won't say it was the cleanest game. There was a few dirty hits, a few plays that you could tell like Colorado was getting frustrated because it just was one of the, from a size standpoint, obviously North Dakota State's not a Big Ten team. It's not a Power 5 team, but they do have dudes up on both sides of the offense and defensive line, and you could see that because Colorado's overhauled their defensive line. They got Warren Sapp now as a defensive analyst or specialist or whatever, who NFL legend. So their defensive line's gotten a lot better than it was last year, because last year it felt like they couldn't get pressure on anybody, and they were giving up passing numbers, like gargantuan passing numbers to quarterbacks. The issue last week was their defense line was getting pressure, but they weren't doing a good job containing it all. The quarterback for North Dakota State had like over 100 yards. He led them in rushing and passing. So that was a big emphasis for Deion Sanders, I know, after the game, which is contain. But definitely not as smooth of a start. And I believe Coach Prime or Deion Sanders, or whatever you want to say, said like after the game they won, but it felt like they lost because of how close it was. And North Dakota State is this team that Power 5 programs are sometimes scared to schedule.
Yeah, they
because
avoid them.
It's a very talented team, and they played really well. And it came down to basically a final drive, and it came down to some of Colorado's best players making spectacular plays, aka Travis Hunter putting his hand up. You could see it on the sidelines, like waving to Shadur Sanders. They run the same concept like for the 5th time that game. And Shadur Sanders throws not even the best ball, but the catch that Travis Hunter made was incredible. There's a reason he's on the cover of College Football 25. There's a reason he's going to be a first-round pick next year. But I think that's why the Huskers are favored this week, because of those close plays and really having to rely on their star players to make miraculous plays to get past North Dakota State. It just wasn't the most complete game.
And I mean, if you go back last year, the Huskers were in that game, especially through the first half. And, they had like 2 or 3 turnovers.
5 fumbles, an interception, and they had a fumble to give Colorado the ball. Colorado, I believe, kicked a field goal. Then the very next play from Jeff Sims, he throws an interception on the outside. 2 plays later, deep touchdown to LeJonte Webster by Shadur Sanders, and the doors were just off. And Jeff Sims had a long touchdown run. I believe begin the second half. He hurt his ankle that game. There was a lot of factors, but it was just a game that the turnovers in the offense played so bad that it just gave Colorado layups on offense themselves. So I wouldn't be completely saying it was on Nebraska's defense, but Nebraska's defense did let Shedeur Sanders kind of nickel and dime them a little bit, especially in the second half, when they still sacked them 10 times. Like, incredible numbers on the defensive line. But the secondary is really going to be the test this weekend.
So the over-under is, I think, 58.5. But it feels
that's saying there's not going to be much defense.
But it feels like a game, especially, with Nebraska's poor running backs, they trotted out this last week. Obviously Raiola is dynamic in the passing game. It feels like a game, the more you can keep the ball out of Shedeur Sanders' hands and Travis Hunter's hands, the better off you're going to be. So to lean on that running game, and again, they controlled the time of possession. I forget what exactly the final numbers were.
Well, you're saying against UTEP?
Against UTEP. I think they had the ball for 17 more minutes than UTEP or something like that. Some ungodly number. So, again, trying to do something similar to that this week.
Well, and I think, while fans would love to see Dylan Raiola throw for 350 yards and 3 touchdowns, they're good. They're going to establish a run game, and this is going to be an offense that's going to run the ball regardless. They're going to run out 2 tight end sets. They're going to put Luke Lindenmeyer out there to blow somebody up. So, the time of possession is going to be a big deal because Colorado can score and score quickly. And Colorado, maybe it was just a good game plan by North Dakota State. Maybe it was the offensive game plan. They could not run the ball last week at all. I think their leading rusher had less than 30 rushing yards against North Dakota State. So I look for the secondary to be the biggest test for Nebraska because it's not just Travis Hunter. They have dynamic players. They have Jimmy Horn Jr., who I believe is probably a top 3-round draft pick in a receiver standpoint. LaJohntay Webster, I believe, is back. And then Shedeur's just ability, right? So it's just a really dynamic Colorado team where the offense is going to be tested. And, as Husker fans may not remember, Ty Robinson had some good quotes today talking about it. He didn't play the first half of the Colorado game last year because of a targeting call in the second half of the Minnesota game, which was fairly controversial, that suspended him for the first half of the Colorado game. Mm-hmm. So he's someone that's hungry. The defense is arguably better or just returning a lot, but secondary is going to be the biggest question. And then obviously Nebraska's offense is going to be the biggest question because it's just a lot of stakes. It's not UTEP.
There's not. And so it's going to be a 6:30 kick. It's going to be, again, night game in Memorial Stadium. The crowd's going to be electric. This is the Nebraska will be going for their 50th win against Colorado. They lead the series 49-21-2, but Colorado, as many Husker fans will know, have won the last 3. Again, obviously last year in Boulder, and then I believe it was 2018, 2019, again, a couple Scott Frost teams.
Would you say this is the biggest Nebraska game this decade?
Ooh. It's up there. It's up there because of what's potentially on the table. Again, there's been, could they go 7-0 to start?
And I'm not including potential feature games this season, obviously.
Yes.
College football playoff.
I think for what is potentially on the table, if you do win this game, and again, the players who spoke at the podium today said it. It's one game at a time.
Very reserved. There was no leaks of not wearing black this week or we don't like Colorado. And obviously, Isaac Gifford said, this game is different, and players know that, and they're excited for the atmosphere. But yeah, overall, they're treating it very head down focused, and that goes from the top down, from Matt Rule to the last player on the roster. So, but everyone knows the implications of this game.
But I think to answer your question, I think yes. I mean, if they can, again, primetime, NBC, 6:30 kick, night game, the amount of recruits that are going to be there, what's on the table for you potentially if you do get by this game, because then you got Northern Iowa next week. That's going to be a win, and then a fairly easy, manageable start to Big Ten play before you get some of the heavy hitters in the second half of the schedule. Again, if you can win this game, if you can win it convincingly. Again, they were receiving votes in the top 25 today, just outside of the top 25. But again, if you win this game, I would certainly expect to see them probably in the top 25 next week.
Yeah, potentially. I think last year, obviously, Colorado was ranked when they played Colorado last year after taking down former national runner-up TCU in week 1. And Colorado surprised a lot of people, but then they kind of fell from grace.
Yes.
I think Rule didn't want to speak on this, but it was asked about like how much of a measuring stick this is. I think this is a big game for Husker fans and whatnot, but just from a national media standpoint, whoever comes out victorious of this game is going to be a lot more in the spotlight and a lot more attention on them from an awards standpoint, from a bowl game standpoint, just from a media coverage standpoint, besides here locally. Whoever comes out victorious this game is going to get the lion's share of that because of just how much attention's on this specific game.
Yeah, the national media is kind of turning their heads around and saying, "Oh, well, what's Matt Rule doing over there? He got a big 5-star quarterback. How's this going?" And so again, if you can win this game, again, a lot of good press is going to get thrown your way. So
yeah.
Any other storylines Colorado week we need to touch on, Jace?
Colt McCoy's in the booth.
Colt McCoy is in the booth for NBC.
UT Longhorn, longtime NFL backup quarterback, but
I think a lot of Nebraska fans have a soft spot for Colt McCoy, even though he's obviously a former Texas quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
But because of what Ndamukong Suh did to Colt McCoy in the 2009 Big 12 championship.
And he'll be the analyst on this game, I should preface. Yeah.
Yes. Paul Burmeister, Colt McCoy, and Catherine Tappan on the NBC call.
We got upgraded. Last year, Nebraska was on Peacock.
Not this year.
Fans didn't like that.
Not this year. Really quickly, though, I do want to touch on Chase because volleyball, John Cook's got his squad off to a perfect start, 3-0. Again, obviously Kentucky last week at the ABCA First Serve Showcase, and then Texas A&M, Corpus Christi, and TCU. Again, they win those matches 3-0 and 3-1. You had Becca Alec and Bergen Riley earn some Big Ten honors. Number 2 again in the ABCA poll that was released yesterday, but Texas, who was number 1, they went down to Minnesota last night. So again, if the Huskers, who have a couple matches this week, they're on the road against SMU tonight, and then they have a Husker Invitational later this week. But if they can handle their business, they should kind of vault over Texas back to the number 1 spot.
Yeah, you'd think so. Texas has played some talented people. Wisconsin's had a gauntlet schedule
0-3
to start the season, and they've lost all 3 of those games, also playing in the ABCA First Serve. The games the past yesterday and whatnot were part of I believe it was maybe State Farm. It was a sponsored event as well, a showcase that Nebraska was not part of, but potentially could be part of something in future years. It was on Fox. Big deal during Labor Day. And Stanford picked up a big win as well. And, yeah, Minnesota taking down Texas, as you mentioned. But, yeah, and then they played tonight versus SMU on the road. This is a pretty good SMU team. Their setter is actually Casey Batenhorst, who's Allie Batenhorst's sister. It was a big deal last year when SMU actually came to Lincoln. This is a 2-year, I guess, non-con kind of contract, home and home. All the Batenhorsts had, like, it was the Batenhorst shirt and Batenhorst game. Obviously, Allie's not on the team anymore, but they'll be facing Casey again tonight. They have a Florida transfer that's pretty good on SMU. So SMU is actually probably the toughest game this week for Nebraska, just given that it's a home crowd, even though Big Red Nation will show out in Dallas. But the rest of the games this week, they should win. So, look to them to potentially take the top spot. They're playing, I believe, Denver, who they played in the spring game and has ties to Nebraska. I think they might be played the Citadel and then Montana State. So, and the weekend games looks pretty favorable for Nebraska. Tonight might be interesting. We'll have to see. To be honest, they've started out the season 3-0. But they haven't looked perfect in every game. Some hitting errors. Their offense has been not as good as their defense. And last year it felt like their offense was really strong pretty consistently. This year, the block and what Rebecca Alec has been able to do has been pretty incredible. She was Big Ten Defensive Player of the Week for a good reason. But, it'll be interesting to see that they're still kind of figuring kinks out with new players on the roster and just getting back into the swing of things, literally.
So, I don't know if you have the ACC network, but that is how you can watch tonight's game. SMU now part
I'll just fly down to Dallas.
Yeah, just fly
Moody
down
Coliseum.
Moody Coliseum in Dallas, Texas. SMU. That first serve is at 7, and then they back home against the Citadel Thursday at 6 p.m. And that game will be on Big Ten Plus. Is how you can watch those games. Really quickly, last week was first week of high school football. Everything go okay? I know.
It was a special night last Friday. We had the Spirit Sword game, and it meant a lot for Lincoln Christian to win that game. I encourage you guys to go check out our Sports Overtime coverage of that. I won't get into too many details, but yeah, it was a good time. There was obviously Lincoln Christian winning a big game. There were some pretty good finishes. Lincoln North Star ran the double pass that looked almost identical to Jeff Sims to Alex Bullock, Week 1 Minnesota last year. Lincoln North Star took down Lincoln Southwest, which was kind of an upset. Lincoln East, they don't have Jeter Worthley anymore, who was their quarterback for a number of years. He's not playing football for his senior season. They have Ryan Manning, who's the son of Mark Manning, the wrestling coach, but Lincoln East did not look pretty good. They took a pretty bad loss to Elkhorn South. So Lincoln teams, Lincoln Northeast got their first win in, I believe, 24 games.
There we go.
So there were some good games. There were some bad games. It doesn't feel like Lincoln has the strongest of suits, but the surrounding area, the Waverlys, the Norris, Kearney, they're all pretty good. So it was a pretty exciting week. This week we got another great slate of games. So
all right, yeah, Week 1 in the books.
Yeah,
ready to hit the ground running with Week 2 and the rest of it. So before you blink, it's going to be November, and we'll be getting ready for state title, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, Chase, anything else before we let everyone go today? We covered it all. Buckle
up.
We didn't cover it all. There's plenty we didn't even touch on. But,
yeah.
But again, keep it tuned. Again, End Report 6 and 10. Chase is going to have you covered. Again, Nebraska football, Nebraska volleyball, Nebraska soccer. I think they beat Creighton over the weekend.
Second
5-2.
hat trick of the season for Sarah Weber. So
yeah,
she is I think second nationally in total goals scored. But Nebraska soccer doing well. So a lot of good things going for Nebraska. So
there we go. All right. Well, appreciate everyone for tuning in and watching. As always, for Chase Matteson, I'm Bill Rentschler. Hope everyone has a nice Tuesday, and we'll see you again next week.
You've been listening to the Report Husker Show, sponsored by Fat Dog's Convenience Store. Watch, listen, and stream on the 1011 Now app, on YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. For more Husker coverage throughout the week, watch the Report on 1011 Sports at 6 and 10 p.m. and download the 1011 Now app.